All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on this special replay episode of a webinar that I actually held just a few moments ago where we had a little bit of technical problems. And so I'm going to go ahead and redo that webinar right here for everybody. And if you'd like, feel free to go ahead and join in and watch as we go ahead and represent the top 3 sales skills you need to win. So if you're a real estate investor, a realtor who's considering investing, then you'll certainly want to go ahead and consider thinking about these top 3 sales skills that you need to win, especially when we got a more competitive environment than ever. I mean, good God, when you think about all the new realtors going to school, all the new investors going and piling into all the new guru classes, I mean, as you think about it, there's more competition than ever. So you need to go ahead and have some skills so you can go ahead and win when it comes to sales. So today, what we're going to talk about are all of those things and the top 3 things that you need to have to win. So to start us off, just a quick introduction. My name is Carl Krenzel. I'm an associate broker over at Realty Executives Tucson Elite. I'm a podcaster at theredpillinvestor.com. And if you've not had an opportunity to listen to that, we have over 420 episodes of sales skills specifically designed for real estate wholesalers. So you'll definitely want to go ahead and check that out. I'm also a blogger at 10minuteskill.com, which is the blog that I use to help write down some of the thoughts that I have with regards to the podcast at the Red Pill Investor. Now, one of the things I would certainly encourage you to do, if you haven't done so already, is turn off that cell phone. Definitely go ahead and turn it off or mute it so you won't get any interruptions, because I got some really powerful ideas. I'm not going to try and sell you anything, but I've got some powerful ideas to help you grow your business, and I don't want you to miss a single thing. That's why I'm going ahead and redoing this, because it's that important. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, one of the things I think about when you're in real estate and real estate investing in particular is you tend to think that you gotta get a lot of leads. You got to get so many leads to be successful. I mean, the truth is you'll go, search heaven and earth trying to find motivated seller leads. You'll pay through the nose for them. But the truth is that your greatest opportunity for success lies right under your feet, your own acre of diamonds. When I think about this acre of diamonds, I think about the story. And if you're not familiar with it, basically what it's a story of is an old Persian farmer by the name of Al-Hafed. And Al-Hafed was a very wealthy farmer. And he was wealthy, the story goes, not only because he owned a lot of land and he owned a lot of cattle and he owned a lot of money, but because he was wealthy because he was content. I mean, he had a very content heart. And one day, the story goes, he's sitting in his field talking to some Buddhist monk. And they're sitting by the fire, and the Buddhist monk says, let me tell you how the world begins. Let me tell you how the whole thing got started. And he described to him how the heavens formed and the earth was formed and the seas were formed and the minerals and the gold and silver, but most of all, diamonds. Diamonds were congealed sunlight, and they had great value. And if Al-Hafed only had diamonds, then he would be so successful and he would have everything he'd ever wanted. He could put his children on thrones. That night, the story says, Al-Hafed went to bed discontented. Discontented because he didn't have the diamonds. He had gold, he had money, but didn't have diamonds. Said that he couldn't really sleep all night, and in the morning, he went and found this Buddhist priest and shook him and said, wake up. The story says that, as you know, the Buddhist priests hate being woken up early. So this poor Buddhist priest is being shaken awake by Al-Hafed, and he says, what do you want? And he says, I got to know where to find these diamonds. And the priest says, well, what do you want to find diamonds for? He says, I'm going to find diamonds so I can be rich and put my kids on thrones. I want to make a lot of money, and I just have to have it. He says, fine, if you have to have it, simply search for a river that flows through white sands between two mountains. That's where you'll find your diamonds. You go do that. Al-Hafed says, are you sure about this? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Go find two high mountains and some white sand and some river running through it. And that's where you're going to go find your diamonds. Al-Hafed says, yes, perfect. That's exactly what I need to know. And he flies off, and he just goes off and does what he needs to do. And he takes his home, and he takes all of his property, and he sells. The story says he sold his property on interest, which to me means he sold it on an owner carryback. So he sells his property on an owner carryback to this other guy. And the story says he searches high and low, goes through Palestine and Europe, and eventually ends up in Barcelona, Spain. And by this point, the story relates that he's poor and wretched and ragged and beyond repair, desperate. He sees a wave rolling in, and he casts himself into the sea, never to be heard from again. And the story doesn't end there, however. A few days after Al-Hafed left, the guy who bought the property on, owner carryback, he's taking his camel down to the river to get some water. The river on the property, the river that's with sand, white sand, and it just so happens to be a river that runs between two very high mountains. I mean, this guy, he doesn't think anything about it. He's letting his camels drink, and he sees something bright and shiny in the water. He thinks to himself, well, that's odd. He looks and pulls out this huge rock. And it's got this little shiny part in it, but it's kind of interesting. But the rest is very dark and not much to it. When he thinks it's interesting, take it home, puts it on his mantle. And as he puts it on his mantle, he forgets about it. A few days later, the Buddhist priest comes back and says, hey, has Al-Hafed showed up yet? Is he back yet? Where's he been? Oh, no, he sold me the house. He sold you the house? Yeah. Oh, my goodness. He looks inside. He sees on the mantle this huge diamond. A diamond. It's unmistakable. He rushes in, pushes past the homeowner, pushes in, says, oh, my God, this is a diamond. This is a diamond. This is it. This is it. This is it. Is Al-Hafed around? He says, no, I told you. Al-Hafed is gone. He's left. He said, this is a diamond. No, that's just a rock. I mean, got tons of them down by the river. We got a river down there, white sands, high mountains. They go down and discover diamonds everywhere. I mean, practically at digging, you could find diamonds everywhere, simply under the surface. If Al-Hafed had stayed, he would have been a very rich man, because that story relates about about a mine that is more expensive than, produced more diamonds than the Kimberley mine. So it's my belief that you don't necessarily need more leads. You don't need to search everywhere for it. You just need to lose less. And how we do that, when you think about prospecting, for example, an ounce of gold is worth $1,800. A lot of people say that prospecting is a lot like digging for gold. You could dig for gold with a spoon, or you could dig with a shovel, you could dig with a bulldozer or whatever, right? And that's true, you could. The problem is when you dig for gold like that, you create a lot of mess. There's dirt everywhere. The neighbors hate the noise. Bulldozers leave marks. I mean, people hate that. And when you think about it, all the effort that you get, an ounce of gold, really at the end of the day, it's worth about 1,800 bucks. That's all it's really worth. When you think about Kobe Bryant's apology ring, however, that was 8 carats, which is really about a half an ounce. That was worth $4 million. So when you compare apples to apples, ounce to ounce, an ounce of gold being worth 1,800 bucks, diamonds, an ounce, 8 million bucks. It makes sense, to be good at finding diamonds. But finding diamonds requires a different approach than finding gold. See, the biggest problem I've discovered as an investor, as a coach, as a podcaster and a blogger, the biggest problem I've discovered is wholesalers and realtors try to find diamonds the same way they try to find gold. But you can't do it that way. Oh, sure, you could go out and take a bulldozer and dig in an area where you think there's gold. But the reality is, just like digging for, gold, if you're digging for gold, let's just be honest. If you got a bulldozer, you're going to miss flakes and small things, the things that would add up that would make some money because it's just so big, your bulldozer, right? And then, of course, you've got nuggets, of course, that you would upend, I suppose. But then the problem is if they're big enough for everybody to see, then you got everybody climbing all over it and trying to get to it. So you can't really use the same approach. No, for finding diamonds, you need x-rays. So that's how they discover diamonds. They use x-rays. It causes them to be photophorescent, so you can see even the tiniest of diamonds hidden in the deepest of rock. The smallest of deals could be found if you would have x-rays for your business. See, so today what we're going to talk about are the top 3 sales skills that you must know to have this x-ray vision for your business. So if you've got a pen and you got a piece of paper, I want you to go ahead and write down the first skill you need to have. Let's begin with the end in mind, closing skills. Closing skills. See, it's absolutely true that if you know what to say, the fear goes away. Problem solved. There's nothing else to worry about. If you know how to do that, then you don't worry about prospecting. You don't worry about lead follow-up. You don't worry about pre-qualifying people because you understand what needs to be said at the end. Then you have to ask yourself, how much is enough? How many transactions do you want in the next 12 months? If you're a realtor or if you're an investor, this is a critical question. You have to ask yourself, how many transactions do you want to have accomplished in the next 12 months? If you don't have a very good answer for this, then you're really missing out. If you've just got a dollar bill amount, well, I want to make X amount of dollars, listen, you're losing out. Think about it. If you go on 10 appointments and I go on 10 appointments, okay? And because of your skill set, you get 6 and I get 4 out of those 10. All things are equal. All things are same objection types, same equity problems, et cetera, et cetera. Everything's equal, but because of your skill set, you get 6 of them to sign something and I get 4. You get 20% more with no extra time and no extra cost. The trick is not getting more leads. The trick is losing less. See, this is efficiency. By knowing what to say, by knowing when to say it, and how to say it. That's efficiency. So to make that happen, it creates this closing skill that you have to create. Understand, when you know what to say, well, then that fear is completely gone. You have nothing to fear anymore. And understand, my mentor, Mike Ferry, he taught me closing is a natural ending to a great presentation. It really is. I mean, closing is a great way to end a great presentation. It's just like you going out to have a dinner. You have steak, baked potatoes, you're over at Texas Roadhouse or God knows wherever it is, Ruth, Chris, God knows wherever you go. And let's say the waiter comes up and says, would you like coffee and dessert? You're not going to freak out and say, I can't take it. What are you kidding me? No. You're not going to freak out. You'll be like, yes, no, maybe so, whatever. I don't know. But that's all it is. It's just a natural ending to a great dinner, coffee and dessert. Closing is a natural ending to a great presentation. If you're talking to them about buying their home and you come up with some price and you come up with a skill and you come up with a strategy, well, then it's only natural that you would ask them to participate in that strategy, right? Ask one more time than you're comfortable with. Ask one more time than you're comfortable with. I mean, think about it. If you're going out there in the marketplace and you're making a presentation to somebody and they're telling you no, I mean, you've been there. It doesn't make a difference if you're a wholesaler or a realtor. Either way, it would be the same. If you're an investor, then they're going to say, well, no, we don't want to take your price. It's just too high or too low. We don't want to take that. And if you're a realtor, they can say, well, we can't list our home for that price. That's ridiculous. You got to close one more time than you're comfortable with. You got three choices. You could either go ahead and say, well, you're crazy, you'll never get your price, or the comps say that, and your home is this, your home is that, and all these other things. You could do that. But remember, if you do that, anything you say about the seller and the property that they're in or involved with, any attack about that is an attack on the seller. So you can't really say anything bad about them. You can't really say anything bad about the property. So on the other hand, you say, well, okay, fine. You know what? Here's my offer. Get back to me. You retreat. That's your other option. But that's not a very good option either. Because when you think about it, you're trying to make a living at this. And if you're a wholesaler, if you're a realtor who invests, if you're a realtor who lists, if you're trying to do any of this kind of stuff professionally with real estate, and when I mean professionally, I mean doing it full time, that like this is your thing, this is what you do all the time. If that's what you aspire to do, you got to appreciate the fact that you cannot walk away. That's just as simple as that. Zig Ziglar said it best: scared salespeople have skinny kids. So if you can't attack them and you can't walk away, what do? Well, you tell a story. You tell a story to help them understand, and you do that by asking questions. You got to understand, selling is all about asking questions. Let me give you an example of this, okay? Let me ask you this. If you were in a position as a realtor or as an investor to help somebody, would you provide them the best service that you could? Now, let's just start at the base there. Would you provide the best service that you possibly could? My bet, you probably would. I mean, your chances are you're not really following my podcast at theredpillinvestor.com. You're probably not reading my blog at 10minuteskill.com. You're probably not watching my YouTube channel at Sell More Homes Now. You're probably not doing any of that if you're the type that's, criminally minded. So let me ask you then, if that's the case, do you feel you'd be honest with them? I mean, do you think you'd tell them the truth about the price and tell them the truth about the market and tell them the truth about their home and tell them the truth about what you could and couldn't do? Would you be honest? I bet you would. And if that's true, do you think that you'd provide a great service? Oh, yeah. I mean, it could always be better, but heck, everybody does, right? Everybody has room for improvement. By and large, do you think you would provide a great service? You know, and especially if you're a wholesaling investor. I mean, does wholesaling itself provide a good solution? Because remember, not every home is a listing. It just isn't. I'm sorry. Sometimes homeowners, they don't want to list. Sometimes homeowners, they want to sell right now because of some reason. Maybe they're impending tax sale or divorce or heaven knows. So in your mind, does the ability to bring fast cash to a problem provide a good solution? In my mind, I think it's a great solution. There's, quite frankly, there's very few things that cash won't solve. Let me ask you this. Do you think you could do it better than anyone? Oh, sure. There's always somebody in your market or someplace else that does more than you do, that makes more than you do, that closes more transactions than you. But that doesn't mean that they're better than you. In my mind, what qualifies you of being better than somebody is how do you care? You know, how much do you care about that person? And in my mind, that's really a very intimate thing. When you get to know somebody's problem, you get to know their life, you get to know their family, you figure out what's going on. That's intimate. And you have a point where you can care, or you can have a point where you don't care. And it's my belief that if you care, then you're going to go the extra mile. You're going to do whatever it takes. You're going to take the time to help. And if that's the case, you're going to do it better than anybody else simply because you care. So my question to you is, do you think that you can do it better than anyone? I believe you could. And if that's true, well, then isn't it malpractice if you don't at least ask them to use you? I mean, when you think about it, you know, if you're a realtor or an investor or something like that, yeah, it's true. It's not a fiduciary responsibility, and yeah, you're not an attorney and all that. I get it. But if you have the ability to help somebody and you don't because you're scared, because you don't know what to say, because you were lazy, you didn't take the time to learn, well, yeah, aren't you really just allowing that person to list with a tool from Toolville and let their home be on the market for 120, 180 days and never sell? You know, causing them to miss out on a great opportunity in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? I mean, if you're an investor and you're scared and you don't offer them the opportunity to use you to get this home sold, isn't it quite possible that they could lose every single penny of equity that they have because they went ahead and sold it to a wholesaler who didn't know a thing, who just got out of some guru's boot camp? Isn't it malpractice if we don't ask them to use us? And if it is, well, why don't we? Why don't we? Now, you could spend the next 19 years of your life trying to figure that out, like I have, right? I mean, I've been doing this business that long. And it's frankly terrifying to me that I've been doing it this damn long. But let me tell you, to save you some pain, you want to understand just a couple basic points. First, selling is not telling. It's just not. You know, selling is not you going in there and beating them over the head and asking them relentless questions. Is that the best you could do? Is that the best you could do? Is that the best you could do? All this stuff. Selling's not telling people stuff. Selling is asking powerful questions. Powerful questions. Not questions that are rote, that are meaningless, that are trite. No, questions that deal about the motivation. Which leads us to point number 2, qualification skills. Aside from closing skills, which are very, very important, qualification skills are equally important. I mean, they're just as important as closing, because quite honestly, if you don't have a qualified appointment, well, then you're just wasting time. So when we're talking about skill number 2, we're talking about qualification. You want to qualify everybody. Separate the wheat from the chaff. You got to understand it. You can't want it more than they do. And so often I've discovered over the years that, I've practiced as a realtor or as an investor or mentored people or taught agents or coached wholesalers. I mean, the one thing I've discovered more than anything is people try to fit like this square peg in a round hole. You can't want something more than they do. And so often what we do is they say, well, we're thinking of selling, and if we could figure it out, and we go out of our way to try and make it work. But remember, you don't want to buy into their apparent lack of motivation either. I mean, it's very real that they could be at this point where they say, well, gosh, well, we don't really care if it sells or not. I mean, it'd be nice, but, it's not the end of the world. Don't buy into that. Just because they say stuff like that doesn't mean that that's true. I mean, how many times have you ever gone into a store with the full intent of buying something, knowing exactly what you want? You just don't know exactly where it is. And the salesman comes up to you and says, hey, can I help you? And you say, no, I'm just looking. That right there, quite honestly, that's that reflex no. That's the same thing that the customer's telling you when they say, well, it doesn't really matter if it sells or not. That's a reflex no, many times. So don't buy into it. But then that creates this problem. I mean, if I can't want it more than they do, if I want to be, motivated to make this deal happen, but on the other hand, I don't want to buy into this apparent lack of motivation thingy, how do I figure this out? Or how do I figure out who's really motivated, who's really telling the truth? Well, the problem, if trying to figure that is trying to figure out how they're motivated or not, well, the answer is very simple. Ask powerful questions. Ask very powerful questions. None of these questions like, is that the best you can do? Is that the best you can do? Is that the best? No, ask powerful questions. Mr. Seller, what happens if it doesn't sell? What happens if it doesn't sell, Mr. Seller? I'm just curious. Tell me a little bit about that, would you? Many times that's going to tell you a lot about their motivation. And you're not going to have to sit there and dig a ton into it. I mean, just tell me a little bit about what happens if it doesn't sell, Mr. Seller. And don't let them off the hook. Don't let them off the hook. Oh, well, if it doesn't sell, it's not that big of a deal. Nonsense. Don't let them off the hook. They say, well, if it doesn't sell, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, I understand. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Seller. Again, a powerful question. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Seller. If I could close it by Monday, would that be too soon? Or would 6 months be okay? Well, no, we'd like to close, we'd like to close in the next 30 days or so, right? You start to get some more powerful answers. Here's another one. Which is more important? Which is more important to you, Mr. Seller? Which is more important is so powerful. Because here's what happens. When you're talking to a seller and they say, well, we want $395,000 or God knows what, So, well, Mr. Seller, I'm curious, which is more important to you? Is it more important that you get your price or that you move to Tuscaloosa, Alabama in time? Would you tell me a little bit about that? Which is more important? Let's say you're face to face with that for sale by owner who's being a little stubborn, right? Oh, I'll just sell it myself. I don't need to list it with no agent. I don't need to sell it's no wholesale. None of that, right? That kind of guy, right? Mr. Seller, I'm just curious. Which is more important? Is it more important that you sell the home or that you sell the home yourself? Which is more important? That you sell it yourself or that it sells at all? Which is more important? It allows you to regain control over a spiraling downward sales situation. How about this one? If you could convince yourself, how many times have you been in that situation where, you have a seller who's, wanting 100 or whatever, and you're offering 60 or 50 or whatever number you're coming in with, and they're saying that number is ridiculous. And you've pre-qualified them properly. You know that they have the equity. And they say, well, gosh, that offer of 50,000, 60,000, whatever is ridiculous. We'll never take that. How many times have you been in that situation and you just walked away? What would it look like if you instead said, Mr. Seller, let me ask you a question. If you could convince yourself that not only was my offer fair, not only that my offer was fair, but that it would let you get to Tuscaloosa, Alabama in the time you wanted, and that you could search high and low and still never get a better offer. If you could convince yourself that that was true, would you consider moving forward with my offer? You see, that raises the bar entirely. Instead of saying, if I could convince you, which is one level of proof, which is subject to their beliefs, if they believe that you're the authority and that you have the authority right to say something about this, then fine, they would agree with it. But most of the time, they're not going to necessarily agree with you, even if you're a realtor, especially if you're a realtor, because then you'll say whatever it takes. That's what they believe. So if you say, well, if you could convince yourself that X, Y, and Z was possible, would you do whatever? These are powerful questions that you can use to determine whether or not somebody is truly motivated. And motivation is more important than price, more important than location, more important than any other single factor. Because after all, what is sales? I mean, sales is a process. It's not an event. I mean, it's not like they just wake up one day and say, woo, let's sell our home. It doesn't happen like that. Typically what happens is, they see something, they read something, they see a home down the way get sold or go on the market, and then they start thinking about it. And that's when they start investigating things. They go on websites, they check things out, they make calls, they ask people, they call realtors, they call wholesalers. I mean, they ask people for information. It's just the information gathering process. Doesn't mean they're ready to sell. Just means that they're getting information. And then at some point, they decide to sell. They decide to put it on the market. That's when they decide to take that extra step and go from information gathering to action steps. That's when it becomes something different. Now, on your estate sales, your absentee owners, people like that who have a need to sell, something like that, where maybe not your absentee, but certainly your estate sales, where they're forced into this sales environment, this sales process, it's violently thrown onto them, but nonetheless, it is still a process that they have to be in. Therefore, don't give prices over the phone. I mean, when you think about it, it boggles the mind to me that you would give any price over the phone for any property for any reason. You do it because you're trying to save time, which is lazy selling. You need to think tactical and act practical. There is a time and a place for everything. Talking price over the phone on your initial conversation or your pre-qualification call, not necessarily the time. Certainly a good time to figure out how they got to that price, but not a good time to discuss it, how you would make an offer on it. Think tactical. Act practical. What would a buyer do? What would a buyer do? And when you think about this equation, okay, most people who are thinking about selling their home to an investor or selling it to a realtor who invests, most of the time when they're thinking about doing this, they're thinking you're just like everybody else. You're just like every other buyer, that you're going to pay your closing costs. They'll pay theirs. You'll have an inspection. You'll ask for repairs. They'll say no. There's going to be an appraisal, and then you're going to close. That's the way they kind of figure it out, because that's the way WikiHow says it. That's what CNN Money said, or whatever. So if you act outside that, then that causes red flags in their head. So in my market in Tucson, I know that, the first-time home buyers market is up to about 115, 120,000. So for whatever your number is, think about it this way. If you're going to spend 120 grand, act like it. Act like it. I mean, what buyer would actually go and say exactly what they would offer to a for sale by owner over the phone? They never do. Never happens. It just doesn't. The only people who ever do that are investors. So when you're prospecting, if you want to get treated like an investor, start acting like that. But if you want to get treated like a buyer, act like a buyer. Because after all, what is sales comprised of? I mean, really, when you break it down, what is sales really comprised of? Sales, in my mind, 80% of what you think about. It really is. It's 80% of what you think about. If you're getting rotten results in your sales business, it's generally because you got rotten stuff going on in your brain. And most of the time, it's maybe 10% who you talk to. It's not that much. It's just a small portion of people, because really, to get that many deals, you don't need too many people. It's 5% of what you say. Obviously, you don't want to come off sounding like an idiot. You want to have some kind of plan. I mean, there is a difference between a canned presentation and a planned presentation. And of course, when you think about that, it's all about how you say it. I mean, bottom line, how you say things to a prospect really is what's going to give you the results. And the reason why we spend so much time working on the words is so that your mind will let you believe what is possible for you. That's the key. If you have that confidence that you know what to say and how to say it in any sales situation, your mind is going to free you to talk to the 10% you need to find to make the business of your dreams. Which leads us to the third skill you need to master: lead generation by any means necessary. Hey, listen, if there's anything I would tell you that I've learned in my 19 years, a third skill that you must have, it's lead generation. You got to learn how to do it. And the good news is it's fairly simple to do. You have to think about what kind of business you're looking for. As a realtor or as an investor, a wholesaler, lead generation by any means necessary really falls into three things. If you've followed me on the Red Pill Investor podcast for any length of time, or followed me on the Sell More Homes Now on YouTube, or my blog at 10 Minute Scale, any of those places, you'll know that I've said for the longest time, business comes to you in three ways. You got now business, you got future business, and of course you have maybe business. Now, if you've not followed me, or you're watching this for the very first time on Google, or YouTube, listen, first, thanks for showing up. I appreciate that. But let me explain to you how business is coming to you and why you're having so many problems generating the leads you need in your business. First, you have now business. These are people who need to sell now for whatever reason. For sale by owners, for rent by owners, expireds, canceled listings, people like that who need to sell their property now. If you go out and you call an expired listing this morning, you can have a contract this afternoon. That's just as simple as that. You call a for sale by owner, guess what? You could get a contract in just a few days. For rent by owners, cancels, it's pretty much the same. When you think about it, if you contact these people, they want to sell now, and you can negotiate some kind of price that works for everybody. Guess what? You got business. But then, of course, you got future business. And this is where most of your gurus spend a lot of time teaching you to do stuff, right? Things like direct mail, Google AdWords, bandit signs, websites, things like that. They all bring in business. There's no doubt about it. The problem is when you're trying to build a predictable, duplicatable wholesaling business, if you're trying to build a business that you can count on that's going to have money coming to you, you need to be able to predict how this is going to work. And when you're sending out mail, if you've done it at all, you and I both know that it is unpredictable at best. Now, I don't care what lie you've been told about response rates or anything like that. At the end of the day, you're going to have to talk to somebody. When they call back and they say, yeah, I am interested in selling my home. But if you don't know what to say, guess what? You're going to have problems. Google AdWords, calling, bandit signs, websites, you cannot control if somebody's going to call you back. And of course, maybe business. When you think about maybe business, I think about things like REO and short sales, because REO and short sales, they many times have problems. For example, like short sales, for example, particularly with a wholesaler. If you're trying to flip a short sale or assign a contract for a short sale, it's very difficult to do because many times they'll have resale restrictions or non-assignment clauses. So, you can't really control what's going to happen there. There's always some third party over the top of it. And when I think about maybe business and me trying to make some money, I want to get rid of as many contingencies as possible. I just want to get the deal done so I can go ahead and get paid and move on. Help my customer get what they need and go. And I don't want to have to deal with some third-party bank, giving me a bunch of hassles. So the question becomes, where are you spending your time? The hours that you've got available in the week for your real estate business, where are you spending your time? Are you spending it now business, looking for FSBOs, for rent by owners, expired, canceled listings, people who need to sell now so you get a contract today? Or are you spending time in future business? Direct mail, doing some Google AdWords, bandit signs, websites, hoping things work out. You're just putting out some REO listing, or short sales, or maybe some kind of HUD contracts. Chances are you're not spending any time in now business. And unfortunately, now business is what will pay you the most, the fastest. The question becomes, how many leads does it take? Really, how many leads do you need? Going back to this question that we had in the beginning, how many deals were enough? Let's just assume that you wanted to do 12. Let's just assume that. If you're like most realtors and you got about a 50% closing ratio, okay, then you need 24 under contract, right? That's kind of the way that works. So the question is, how many leads does it take to get an appointment? That's probably a good question too. If you think about it, if I got 4 or 5 leads that I got to go through, how many of those people are going to convert into an actual appointment? That's really kind of important to know. Well, once I figure that out, well, then I got to figure out, well, gosh, how many prospects does it take to get to a lead? Because I know that not every person I talk to is a lead. Some of them are prospects where they're just kind of looking for information. They're just figuring things out, but they're not going to make a decision in the next 7 days, which is what a lead is. So how many of those people do I got to go through to get a lead? So let's actually put in some numbers. Let's look at this and see what it actually looks like for you. okay? To get 24 properties under contract, all right? Let's say that closing ratio is 20%, right? That you're able to go on 10 appointments, or 1 in 5, let's say. You're going to get 1 appointment to sign a contract out of every 5 appointments you go on. That's 20%. Let's say that's your closing ratio. You go on 5 appointments, 1 of them will sign, okay? To get your goal of 24, well, you got to get 120 appointments to get 24 under contract. That doesn't seem quite so bad. I mean, it seems manageable, right? I mean, when you think there's 52 weeks in a year, I mean, that breaks down to about 2 appointments per week. Doable, right? Let's look at the real cost of this, though. I mean, these 2 appointments, 52 weeks a year, so that's 1 out of every 5 appointments. That's 24 properties under contract, getting 12 closings. Now, I don't know for you in your marketplace. I know it's customary for a lot of gurus to go out and tell you that it's $10,000 per transaction that you make or whatever. And if it was 12 closings, could an extra $120,000 work for you? But let's just be conservative. Let's just be real. I've always tried to be real with my audience, and I want to be real with you today. So let's just be real. Let's just say worst case. You suck on every single deal, and you get $3,000, let's say, right? Well, that's $36,000, isn't it? I mean, if each deal is $3,000, that's $36,000 a year for all the work you did. I mean, honestly, you could go to Circle K and get a better job. You could go to Circle K and at least you get benefits. You get dental and health, for crying out loud. I mean, that's terrible. That's not the freedom you got into this business for. So the question is, how do you fix this? Well, my mentor, Mike Ferry, taught me if you generate, you don't have to tolerate. And I really learned that well, because it's true. If you generate, you will not have to tolerate much in your real estate business. Somebody's giving you a hassle, get rid of them, replace it, who cares, right? Because think about it. If you generate leads 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then you're not going to have to worry about going out and finding leads and struggling and fighting it out and all that. Now, before you worry about it, don't worry. I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm not going to do anything like that at all. But I am going to share with you some powerful ideas to increase your efficiency as well as your effectiveness, so you can create those 24-hour a day, 7-day a week lead systems for yourself. So if you got a pen and you got a piece of paper, you might want to get it out. Let's write down efficiency and effectiveness. First point, you want to think about technology. If you're a realtor or an investor, wholesaling type guy, think about it. You got to reach more people longer. You got to reach more people longer. I mean, with the way the internet is these days, with blogs and YouTube, web pages like Investor Carrot that I use, I mean, there are so many ways for you to reach people who are of like mind or need services. I mean, think about it. You're here, right? You've been watching this video for however long, and the idea here is to give you some ideas and some tips and some tricks that'll help you in your business, so that hopefully you'll come over and listen to my podcast at theredpillinvestor.com and find out even more cool stuff. Hopefully you'll go over and read my blog at 10minuteskill.com. But when you start going out and reaching more people longer, I don't know what time you're watching this, but you know what? I've known people to watch these things at 2 in the morning. Imagine what it would be like if people could watch something that you put out, maybe a little Google Hangout, how to sell your home fast or something like that. And you gave people tips and tricks and things like that. You became the authority in your area. And then you put that out on your blog and you embedded that in a WordPress site. I mean, there's just so many potentials that you could use to create that 24-hour presence. It's free. And of course, automatic MLS searches. if you're a listing agent, I'm sorry, if you're a realtor of any kind, a real estate agent of any kind, or you have access to the multiple listing service, this is a powerful tool to set up for yourself. And I don't mean set it up for, nonsense searches like, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,000 square feet. I mean, yeah, everybody's got that. No, make them very, very, very specific, keyword specific. Create in the search string in your MLS, tell it to go ahead and search for things like handyman, investor special, fix up, must sell, buyer walked, things like that. When you have the MLS searching through the remarks daily, that's like 24-hour a day, 7-day a lead a week coverage. I mean, throughout the MLS, no matter what time somebody puts something on MLS, if it comes up with that word, must sell, bam, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,000 square feet, must sell, you know about it. There it is. It's sent to you via your Gmail account. And of course, ifttt.com, a very powerful free strategy that you can use. ifttt.com, if this, then that. What they do, they create social networks, or I should say links between your social networks, so that anything happens, let's say on a Craigslist ad, you could search for a targeted Craigslist ad, somebody who must sell or something like that written in their ad. You can have that sent automatically to that same Gmail address that ifttt.com will go ahead and send that to it for you. So 24 hours a day, somebody writes in an ad saying that they must sell something, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? You're going to find out about it. You're going to find out about it before anybody else will. It's amazing if you get something like that sent to you via text or sent to you via email, and you have it on your smartphone, and they just pressed enter and they put in their picture, and then 2 minutes later, you're calling them. It's amazing what you can do with technology these days. But then, of course, all the technology in the world is meaningless. All the technique, all the tips, all the skills, everything is meaningless if you don't have the empathy and you don't know how to convey it. And that's why I think scripting is such an important part of that. You got to use scripts that empower your buyer status. Remember, you are a consumer in the marketplace. You're a buyer. What you're going to do with this property remains unseen at this point. You don't know if you're going to, sell it. You don't know if you're going to assign it. You don't know if you're going to repair it. You don't know if you're going to get a joint venture guy to go in it with you and help you. You don't know what you're doing. You're keeping all your options open. But one thing you do know is you're not going to reside in the premises. Using scripts that empower you, empower your buyer status, is going to help you remain powerful and in control. By systematizing everything that you do, guess what? You're going to shorten that time that you're going to be in that house. You're going to eliminate all the useless chit chat and empty promises that you make. I mean, think about it. When you first go to a property and you're first thinking about either listing it or you're thinking about buying it as a wholesale deal, you've got about 20 minutes to make your case. From the time you get in to 20 minutes or so, that's about as much time as they're going to give you to really make your case before they start making a decision. After that, your chances start going down. You need to start being able to close at minute 20 on your presentations. At minute 30, if you don't have a signed contract at minute 30, well, then your chances of getting it signed go out the window exponentially for every minute after 30. By systematizing everything you say, you shorten the time it takes to get to things, you eliminate the chit-chat, as well as all the empty promises you make. Because believe me, after minute 30, you start saying everything. You forget. Selling ain't telling. Selling is asking powerful questions. And at minute 30, you start telling. Well, Mr. Seller, I suppose we could go up a little bit. Well, Mr. Seller, I suppose we could list it for a little bit longer, or a little bit less, or I could take a little bit less in my commission. Or if you're a wholesaler, you can say, well, gosh, sure, I suppose we could give you a little bit more than I'd thought. Listen, those empty promises are going to come and bite you. And if you need words, if you need scripts, guess what? Go to theredpillinvestor.com for free scripts. I got free scripts for you. I mean, I want you to have them. Absolutely free. Just go in there, tell me where to send them, and I'll send them to you. That's it. This script book is a script book that is designed to help investors. And I can't tell you how many investors have downloaded that book and have used it to their advantage. They go out, they use our for sale by owner scripts as agents to go ahead and find properties to flip for themselves or list. As wholesalers, they use our expired listing script to go ahead and call expired listings and gain an unfair advantage. I mean, they use all of our scripts for handling attorneys and realtors and MLS deals. I mean, these scripts are free for you because knowing the words gives you the power. When you know what to say, the fear goes away. And then, of course, that leads us to the system integration. How to make this all work together. You've listened for a really long time, and I appreciate that. And I just want to share with you a couple takeaway ideas that if you've been listening for a while, or maybe you just joined us, a couple things that I would want to share with you to help you really make the most of this little webinar that I gave. If it was anything, I would say first, close one more time than you're comfortable with. Don't attack the seller. Don't prove them wrong. Don't say the property's this and it needs all that kind of work, and well, this is that and the other. And don't say, well, the comps say this and the comps say. Don't attack the seller. Don't retreat. Don't say, oh, well, what, here's my offer. Just get back to me, let me know, and then walk away. Zig Ziglar was right. I mean, scared salespeople have skinny kids. You need to close one more time than you're comfortable with. And what I mean by closing is tell them a story. A story as to why they should use you. Why they should choose your below market average offer. Why it makes sense to take this $50,000 offer as opposed to holding out for $100,000 or whatever. Why they should take that. They need to hear that story. And that story comes from the pawn shop presentation. That's what I teach you in the Red Pill Investor podcast. I teach you that the pawn shop presentation gives them a easy way to mentally let go. You gotta let them have their moment. And the next thing you need to do, of course, is separate the wheat from the chaff. You got to ask powerful questions. You don't need a lot of deals. You just need a couple. And you need to lose less. And how you do that is by separating the wheat from the chaff. Spend all your energy, all your focus on only the most motivated people. And how you do that is by asking powerful questions. What happens if it doesn't sell? What happens if it doesn't sell, Mr. Seller? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? When I think about that, if you generate, you're not going to have to tolerate all the nonsense in your life. All the people who call you and say terrible things, or the people who want you to do X or Y or whatever it is, the things that you don't like in your business, right? If you don't like something in your business, generate. You won't have to tolerate it. You can get rid of it. You can delegate it out to somebody else. You can fire the customer, whatever it takes. You could just don't have to tolerate it anymore. And isn't that really the freedom that you looked for in this business? I mean, isn't that really why you got into real estate in the first place? Was because you wanted that freedom? For most, that's really what it is. And of course, take the extra step. Take the extra step, to become more efficient and more effective with your time. Becoming efficient is that extra 20%, that getting it under contract just a little bit more. Why? Because you happen to know what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. That's being efficient. Getting the deal actually closed, having it priced right, tons of buyers coming through, good contract work, good escrow work, closes on time. That's being effective. Take the extra step to learn how to become more efficient and effective. In my blog and my podcast, I've got tons of free resources to help you do that. But before I let you go, and as I close, one of the things I would tell you to help create powerful systems for yourself, a weekly plan for success, if you will. In my mind, first, each week, you got to work. I mean, you got to work. You could stop right there, and that would probably be enough. Each week, work. But more than that, each week, work to bring in a saleable contract first. If you're a wholesaling investor, if each week, Monday morning comes, you say, all right, cool. Time's up. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to make my dreams happen. And you work to get that done. You take one property each week, bring in a saleable contract first. 52 weeks. What would your life look like? 52 contracts if you were successful. If half of them closed, that's 25 deals at $3,000 a pop. That's not a bad day, right? Or more. Second, sell your own properties first. Sell your own property first. If there is anything that will cause a deal to crash, anything that will cause a transaction to fall apart, whether it be a listing, whether it be a wholesale transaction, it makes no difference, is when you have other people involved. So try and sell your own properties first. Because you know how it is. Guys come to you, hey, I got this joint venture deal, help me sell it. It's like this daisy chain thing, and you're out there trying to huck this thing out, and you put on $2-3 on it for yourself because you think you're doing yourself something good because you're offering out inventory. No, you're not. You're not doing that at all. You're ruining your name. Every time people see your name, they see it associated with some daisy chain offer that was $3,000 cheaper with the last guy who offered it last week. Let me assure you of something. When it comes to wholesale deals, when it comes to really the best deals of the best, if you have time to hear about it on email, it's not a deal like that, chances are. Sell your own properties first. And if you don't have your own, go back to rule number 1. Each week work to bring in a saleable contract first. And then, of course, the third thing would be to keep your promises to yourself. Keep your promises to yourself and others. See, keeping a promise to others generally is pretty easy. Yeah, you promise you're going to be at the graduation at 7 o'clock, you're there. You promise that you'll have dinner with your wife, you're there. You promise to go pick up some milk on the way home, you do it. But when it comes to promises to yourself, well, we're a little bit sketchier when it comes to that. It's easier to let ourselves down and not to keep the promises that we said we would do. You know how it begins. I mean, you get up, you say, okay, well, this is the day I'm going to do it. Monday comes, the alarm comes, and you press snooze because you want to sleep a little bit longer. You oversleep a little bit. No big deal, right? You're an independent contractor. You're an investor. You run your own life, right? Nobody tells you what to do. You come into work an hour and a half, 2 hours late. You're already behind in your prospecting schedule. Right from the get-go, you haven't kept your promise to yourself. You promised yourself this week would be different. You promised yourself this time would be different. It's really hard to make massive quantum leaps in your business if you cannot keep promises to yourself. That's where it begins. So, that being said, I appreciate your attendance. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know what, if anybody is looking at this, if I'm going to turn this off here and let me take a quick sip of Mountain Dew. It was a very impromptu presentation. Unfortunately, the presentation that I had earlier got kind of messed up. Let's see if anybody has any questions. Let's see here. Doesn't look like it. Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody going ahead and spending the time with me today. Thank you very much. You have a powerful sales day. Bye-bye.